everybody. Welcome to this episode of SEN Talks. I'm here with Daniel today. Hi, Dan.
Hello, everyone.
And some of you who have been following us recently know that Dan is trying to qualify as a solicitor. So he just recently took his exams for anybody who's been emailing me, and I've been saying, I can't get back to you because Daniel's on he's taking his exams. But we're here today to talk about phase transfer. As many of you know, phase transfer deadline is on the 15th of February every single year for any child who is transferring phases. So that is from nursery to primary school, from primary to secondary school, but not for 16-year-olds because that's a different deadline. That's 31st March. So Dan and I wanted to come on and just talk to you guys about what that means, what it entails, and what to look out for. So Dan, what's the first thing that parents should be thinking about on, I think the 15th is a Sunday this year?
Yeah, so you want it on Friday the 13th. You want your decision from the local authority. So just as usual, when you get an amended EHCP plan, you'll receive an amended plan with your school named in section I and a decision letter giving you your 2-month right of appeal to the tribunal. And it's really key you get that by the 15th of February. So that's a statutory deadline. The local authority has to meet it. They have to give you that amended plan with your right of appeal by then. So that really is your absolute priority.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, a lot of parents, like you and I know that a lot of parents will come to us like even now or at the beginning of the year, end of last year, in fact. And because the school search starts a lot sooner, it starts in September. And if we're around now and there's no school and then we come to 2-3 weeks later and there's still no school that have come back and said they can meet need, a lot of parents feel like they're in limbo. So what would we say to those parents?
I think it's just crucial to ask your caseworker what's going on. Obviously, the deadline is the 13th, but that's the absolute latest they have to have your decision by. So I think there's nothing stopping you from going to them if you're uncertain or you haven't had any dialogue with them, asking them what the decision is going to be, whether the case has gone to panel, because as we all know, local authorities' decisions aren't the quickest thing in the world. Usually it has to go through multiple panels and be signed off. So chances are, if you haven't heard anything, it might be worth going to your caseworker and asking them for an update, because you want to kind of lay that groundwork so that everything's in place for that decision to be made by the 13th for the absolute latest. Yeah.
And I think that open communication is really
100%.
Yeah, really quite key with local authorities. I think, some parents put in complaints, don't they? But that doesn't really get things moving in terms of getting a decision. And what our listeners shouldn't forget is that local authorities can name a final plan without a school. Mm-hmm. So they can just finalise it and say type of school, so special or mainstream, for example, or they can just leave it completely blank. What would kind of like be the next steps for that if we ask them to name it blank?
So obviously, if they name it blank, you'll get your right of appeal to SEN Tribunal, and I think get your appeal as soon as possible would be our suggestion, because the tribunal reserves hearing dates for secondary transfer appeals and obviously transfer from nursery to reception. So you want to kind of get into the queue, get your appeal registered as soon as possible. Very often caseworkers will say, we're not going to reach the deadline because we haven't got a school, and that might seem helpful and they might want to delay issuing the decision so they can have time to find a school, but that is going to delay you getting your right of appeal. So I think whilst you can give them further time to find a school, you should say to them, look, I appreciate you haven't found a school yet, but please can we have at least a blank section I so that we have that right of appeal and we can get the appeal lodged, and you can kind of get in front of the queue of everyone else who's trying to appeal. It's frankly a very busy time in the SEN world.
Exactly. And there's nothing stopping parents and local authorities from continuing the school search whilst an appeal is lodged.
As you said, keep the dialogue open. Just because they issue that plan doesn't mean that's it. You can just say, I just want my right of appeal. They'll understand. I think it's always helpful to be, civil and open with your caseworker. We both work for local authorities. Yep. We know what it's like. They're very busy people, caseworkers. So I think if you're just open and honest with them, stay cordial, even that might be hard at times.
Yeah, very hard.
I know it's easier said than done. But the school search can keep going. And even if, best case scenario, you get the school you want, if you've got your appeal registered, when it gets you get your registration document, you can just go to the tribunal and say, look, actually, we're not disputing it anymore, and withdraw it. But I think it's just important that you're at the front of that queue because it's so important to get that decision by the deadline so that you have your appeal heard before the end of the year.
Yeah, for sure. With that, I know you and I went to, they're called Tribunal user group meetings, and advocates, solicitors and people who are using the tribunal go to them. They're heard kind of semi-regularly, quarterly maybe, or 3 times a year, termly maybe. There is, because of the sheer amount of appeals that are being registered, particularly at this very busy period of the year, the phase transfer period, and obviously you've got post-16 transfer as well that comes on the 31st. So there's another kind of cohort of appeals that come in at that point. And as you and I both know, because we hear the statistics, that number is not yet plateauing.
Yeah,
it increases year on year. And obviously the tribunal have limited resource, and they are very clogged up at the moment. Anybody who's lodged an appeal, it's 12
hearing in
months.
13 months, 13 months.
Exactly. So what they are going to trial, we understand, is not listing hearings and only listing hearings for people who are ready. Do you want to just explain a little bit about what they told us about that?
Yeah, so anyone who's been to the tribunal before, they'll know as standard you get your registration documents, and that has 3 key dates. It has the LA's response date, your final evidence deadline, and the one that parents care about most, which is the hearing date. And that's the way the tribunals run for as long as anyone can remember. It's standard. But this year, because they're inundated with requests and there's just, to be frank, not enough hearing dates within the priority window to ensure everyone's heard, the tribunal is going to start triaging and prioritising cases. So as standard, you'll still get your LA response date and evidence deadline when your appeal is registered. But crucially and quite strangely, you won't get a hearing date. So what the tribunal have said is when everyone submitted their evidence and submits their case review forms, which is standard now, the tribunal is going to triage the case. They're going to look at which cases are ready to proceed to hearing and which ones aren't. And if it's ready to go to hearing, you'll be allocated a hearing date. And that's about as far as we've got in terms of detail. We don't kind of know what the turnaround is going to be.
Yeah.
You'd imagine you'll need at least a few weeks' notice on a hearing date. So we'll have to see how it works in practice.
Yeah. And the idea is that only those cases that are ready to proceed to a hearing, i.e. there's an incentive there to get your evidence in and to get ready for a hearing, will actually go and proceed to a hearing, because there's a lot of requests that come into the tribunal that clog up the system for hearing dates to be moved around because of expert availability. But I mean, just based on what me and you do and the availability of all the experts, when was the last time you was able to get an educational psychologist available in 2-3 weeks' time for an entire day?
I mean, we always joke that the hardest part of the job, right, is coordinating experts. And that's when we have months, almost a year of notice on a hearing date sometimes. So, I can see the tribunal's logic in trying to, prioritise their resources, but how that's actually going to work in practice in terms of coordinating ourselves, clients, experts, childcare, schools on such short notice remains to be seen.
I don't I laugh because I don't know how we're going to deal with it. And we was having this discussion with Adam yesterday actually, and he said, "Oh, I'm not. There's been nothing else since that meeting that was first presented to us to say, oh, this is definitely happening." And I think the way that we're going to find out is whoever in the team lodges the first appeal after the 15th of February.
Touch wood, it's not us who are the guinea pigs for it. But
I don't know, but it's always nervous going. It makes you nervous, isn't it? Whoever goes first, whoever's doing the new process the first time around, just like the practice direction that's coming through. Like no one's got opposed yet for having reports over 15 pages, but. Woe to that person who is the first to challenge that and to deal with that situation. But a lot of what parents will be worried about as well is, what if I'm not heard in the summer and my kid doesn't have a place for primary school in September or for secondary school in September? What happens then?
So obviously the priority window is before for some holidays, and the absolute priority is to get your case heard before the end of the school year. That's why we said, get your decision, get your experts ready to make sure that you can have one of them priority cases. And obviously it's certainly not ideal if your case isn't heard before the end of the year, But in recent years, and I'd imagine we were saying this year, the tribunal will try list your case for the earliest possible date in the next academic year. So if you don't get a hearing date by July, worst case scenario, you might be looking at September. So the priority does continue kind of beyond the academic year. They do try and get the cases heard as soon as possible. So, I'd say don't panic. You will be heard sooner. You won't have to wait 13 months like we're seeing on normal cases. That priority window does continue into the next academic year.
Yeah. And what about August hearings? It's a bit of a red herring.
They always get mentioned, but they're not popular with judges. Schools aren't open.
Because, local authorities as well, because all their witnesses are on leave, right? A lot of their witnesses are on leave in the summer holidays.
So I certainly wouldn't rely on an August hearing as a fallback option, I don't think.
Paper hearings? Because that's always bandied about as well.
You can get a paper hearing, but again, there's very clear risks on a paper hearing, especially if there's placement on the line. I think refusal to assess, refusal to issue is one thing, because it's quite a binary decision. But when it's a school placement on the line, I think you are going to want your experts there. So, you can judge on a case-by-case basis. If you do want to go for a paper hearing and get your case heard sooner rather than later, it's an option. But I think we'd both say tread very lightly with that and exercise extreme caution on a paper hearing.
I'd say get advice. The final thing that I wanted to we wanted to tell parents at this stage is what happens if you don't get a decision. So as some of you might know, what you have to do is you have to consult a solicitor, because that deadline is a statutory deadline. So local authority it's a must duty. They must name a school and finalise a plan by the 15th of February for every child who is in phase transfer year. And so you can consult solicitors to send something called a pre-action protocol letter for judicial review in order to achieve that aim, to then have the ability to go to a tribunal. So just explain, kind of outline what a pre-action protocol letter is.
Yeah, so a pre-action protocol letter, it's a formal legal document, and you send it to another side, in this case of a local authority, when they haven't complied with a legal duty. And it's essentially pre-warning or notice that you're intending to take them to the High Court for a judicial review. Now, that sounds scary, and a lot of parents will be thinking, I don't want to go to the High Court for a judicial review. But when there's a statutory deadline breach, sometimes you need to give that local authority that kind of fear and let them know, look, we're going to enforce your legal duty if you don't comply with it. So it's essentially a document, a letter written by a solicitor outlining what the legal breach is and what we expect them to rectify it.
Yeah, i.e. finalised plan.
In this case, it's quite straightforward. You have a statutory deadline of the 15th of February. You haven't met it. Issue a plan as soon as possible. Usually they have 14 days to respond. And 9 times out of 10, the vast majority of times, they'll issue one, hopefully within the 14-day window, and you'll get that right of appeal. Exactly.
Crucially, 9 times out of 10, it is resolved. And yes, it is scary. You and I have done a couple of judicial reviews. It's very scary.
No one enjoys it.
No one enjoys it. But it is a necessary feat sometimes. I think I said with your first one, I had to send you down to the...
Yeah, I remember a few trips to the RCJ in my first weeks here.
Very old school style. You have to post it. The other one we did wasn't in London.
No, it was based in Leeds.
Yeah, so this one, if it's in London, because we're not too far from it, you have to post it. We had to take photos of us.
It wasn't half as fun as you'd think it'd be either. It was just a massive Dropbox. It wasn't a case of serving papers on anyone or anything fun like that, unfortunately.
Did you hear it hit the floor? Or was there nothing else in there?
I was like, well, that's it, done now.
Lovely. Well, thank you very much, Dan, for helping me on this one and getting the information out. I think it's a really crucial time of year, and I think it's really important for parents to be reminded of that. And thank you, everybody, for listening.
Thank you, everyone.